I want you to do this right now. I want you to think about the very first insecurity that you had about yourself. Most people can't remember the first one. You know, you can maybe think about a few recent ones or a few early ones in your life, but it's kind of hard to remember the first one, right? For me, I'm able to remember my first one, and this happened ever since pretty much when I was born. And that is the ability to not speak Spanish. I wasn't able to speak Spanish as a Hispanic person. Now, I will tell you this, I'm not 100% Hispanic. I am Hispanic Asian. My dad is from Guatemala. My mom is from Philippines. So that makes me mixed. So some of you might be like, oh, you know, most mixed people, they don't usually speak their language. They just speak their language that of the country that they were born in. However, for me, this was pretty personal because I feel like Spanish has always been something I want to learn, and it always felt something like personalized. I always felt like the need to speak it, even though I didn't several years ago. It all started when basically I just felt like people would judge me, you know, people, Hispanic people in general. You know, I look very Hispanic, um, because of my complexion, my dark hair, my darker skin. People look at me and they're like, oh, you know, he definitely is something. You know, he might be from the United States, but he's definitely something. He might speak something. And throughout my years in school, whether that was in middle school or in high school, you know, I would interact with lots of Latinos and lots of people who spoke Spanish, and especially like the kids in high school. Like it was very extremely hard to communicate with them because it almost felt that like just because I couldn't speak the language, I couldn't connect it with them. So I remember this one time I was talking to like a friend or something. I remember like the majority of the classmates in the class were Hispanic, and I was like, "Oh, hey, what's up? Like, what are you guys talking about?" And one of my friends at the time, he was like, "Oh no, I was just telling Isaac about this one car place, in Spanish. You wouldn't understand, buddy." And he kind of just like pat me on the back, and I wanted to say something, you know, like we're guys, like we don't like when people one up us. But in that moment, like I didn't say anything. Like I was just like, I just kind of felt defeated because he was right in a way. And it sucked because it wasn't necessarily my fault. And like I said, most mixed people, they don't really speak the multiple languages, at least in my situation. I know they just speak like their native language. So for example, all the mixed people that I know that are born in the United States, they just speak English. I'm not sure about Europe or Asia or anything else, but that's mostly what happens. But I always just felt like I had to learn it. This especially happened too when I would meet like Hispanic parents too, or like if I had a friend and I went with them and like their parents spoke Spanish, and they were like, "Oh, tú hablas español," and I'm like, "Oh, like I don't," and they're just like, "Ah, okay," you know, they'd just be like, "Oh," and you know, some people might say I was sensitive about it, but I always felt like, geez, like how can I be Hispanic and not speak it? And this was something that I pretty much experienced for like most of my life. I'd say it happened when I was in middle school most of the time, and then especially like the first part of high school. And this all changed. This story all changed. This problem that I had of not being able to speak Spanish, um, this all changed when I was in high school. Because when I was 16 years old, that's when the whole story changed. That's when I decided to learn Spanish for the first time. And I'll tell you, this problem that I had, it all built up to me fixing it. And there's going to be kind of like a moral story and a moral message for you to hear. So I'd say this problem that I had, I experienced being left out, not being able to speak to family, not being able to speak to Latinos in general, Hispanics in general. And the thing or the events that built up to me learning Spanish was freshman year of high school, sophomore year of high school. I was around 15 years old when I was a freshman in high school, and I took the Spanish class. And basically, for each Spanish class that you join in high school, there's like a Spanish 1, there's a Spanish 2 that's a little more advanced, and then you have the 3 and the 4 and the 5, which was like really advanced Spanish, the highest levels of Spanish. And because I already knew like the basic Spanish. I knew basic Spanish. I was placed in 2 because, you know, my dad tried to teach me when I was little. They even signed me up for some classes at kind of like a small university that I had back home. And despite this, you know, my dad, he was working all the time. I didn't really learn from him. I was raised by lots of English speakers, and I just didn't learn the language. But when I got placed in second Spanish, I'm like, okay, like I know the basics, I should be fine. But when I went to this this Spanish class. It was Spanish level 2 class. I was literally the worst student there because I went in my freshman year and I thought like it'd be okay. Like I didn't speak it fluently, but I knew some stuff. I thought I'd be okay, but every single person in there was better than me. I was literally the worst student that was Hispanic in that entire class. I was the worst student in my class. I remember like during the finals, I got like D's. I barely passed. I remember doing like the group activities, like I would really struggle, and I spoke in English. I didn't even know what to do because I didn't know any Spanish. I struggled so much. And this pain went on for that year, and I feel like at that time it really hurt me. And I remember talking to like my parents. I'm like, dude, like guys, I really have to learn Spanish. Like I was like, how long do you think it would take me to learn? And they're like, oh, I feel like if you lock in for like a year, you should be able to learn it. And that's when I started getting into the culture a little bit. I found some music. I think the first ever Spanish song like I really tried to learn was Mayores by Becky G and Bad Bunny. Becky G featuring Bad Bunny. And I remember listening to that for the first time, and I thought that was going to help me learn because I had heard that music will help like language learning. And then I also found another song called Escápate Conmigo with Ozuna, and I think somebody else. But anyways, that's when I started peeking into it, but I still felt bad. And this problem that I still had, I still felt bad. It went all the way up until my sophomore year. So I had left Spanish 2. I did okay. I think I passed with a D, honestly. And then sophomore year comes in, and I'm in a kind of like a tier up. I'm in Spanish 3. And, I'm still pretty just mediocre, right? People that mostly speak English, they were all better than me. I didn't know much. And then this is when everything changed, because then I started going out with a Venezolana. So a Venezolana, for those who don't know, is a term to say a girl from Venezuela. And she was actually from Venezuela. Like she wasn't from the United States. She actually like migrated from the country, Venezuela, to the United States. So I started going out with her, and I'm 16 years old. I don't know what I'm doing. It's a funny relationship. It's interesting. But I remember that's when it changed, because I remember like it wasn't even her that changed me, and it wasn't her teaching me. I'll be honest, she didn't teach me jack. But it was the fact that when I went out with her, I just felt so bad because I couldn't understand her and her friends. Because this one time, this is a pretty interesting story too. She was a senior at the time and I was a sophomore. And I feel like a good part of like why I was in that relationship was because she was older and she was going to like invite me to prom. And going to prom as a sophomore, that's super hyped up. Not a lot of sophomores get to go to prom. But anyways, she had invited me, and then she had invited like all of her like her Venezuelan friends too, and the people, more people that spoke Spanish. And when I went out with them, they all spoke in Spanish, and I just felt really bad because I couldn't understand. And I was like, dude, like I have to lock in. So I'd say that's when I decided to completely lock in and learn Spanish. So I went hard on the music. I started watching interviews of the soccer players that I knew, because I'm also a football fan or a soccer fan if you're in the United States. So I was watching interviews of Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Griezmann, all these players that played in Spain or from a Spanish-speaking country. I started watching interviews with them. I wrote, I read, and I'd say around 2021, which was around 2 years. So I started in 2019, and then in 2021, I could finally like get the basics down. I could talk to people, I could understand here and there. I could understand the rules. And now looking at it now, with 6-7 years learning Spanish, there's a huge benefit. And the first benefit I'd say is I feel like accepted in a way. Like I don't feel judged. And people, I'm going to say something that's kind of like controversial, but I feel like if you're no Sabo kid, right? I feel like people will always judge you. I know you can cope with yourself and say, oh, like, I still enjoy the culture. I don't need to speak the language. People still like show me respect. But be honest with yourself. There's a reason why it's in your head that you should learn the language. There's a reason why you feel bad. You know that you should learn the language. It's hard, but it's possible. So I feel like it's changed my life in a way, because not only am I like accepted now, and I know it sounds kind of weird, but it's just like I'm able to speak it now. When people see that you're able to speak it, it's more than just words exchange. It's a culture. It's a community. It's It's like if you were to meet someone on self-improvement, there's like people who aren't really on self-improvement, they just live like degenerate lives. And then when you meet someone who, watches the same YouTubers as you, lives the same lifestyle, it's like, oh, I can finally connect with you more. That's how I kind of felt with most people. People were showing me respect. People were talking to me in Spanish, and it's just so accepting. I just feel so much better and so much confident. And there's other benefits of learning the language too, and it's just amazing. Y ya llevo como 7 años hablando del idioma, practicando con un montón de gente. Ya tengo un montón de amigos que hablan español. He conocido gente de México, de Venezuela, de Argentina, de España, y valió la pena. And honestly, if you're no Sabo kid, if you're trying to learn, this is probably your chance to luck. And I cannot stress enough. You will be respected. You will feel part of the culture now. And it just brings you so many opportunities. You're allowed to meet so many people. You can connect more. It's more than just words. It's more than just a way of communicating. It's just a lifestyle. It just makes you complete. And, I told you in the beginning of the video that this was an insecurity. And obviously it no longer is. I speak it fluently. I have no problem whatsoever. And yeah, it's just a life-changing event. It's just something that I realized that, dude, something that I didn't like about myself, I changed. I didn't like it and I changed it. I put in all that effort and it worked. And now I no longer feel insecure about this. And this isn't the point of the video, but when I realize what I do with Spanish, it makes me do that same thing to this channel, my physique, working out. If I don't like something, I'm going to change it and I'm going to improve until I'm satisfied with it. Because there's things about us that, we're going to be dissatisfied with in life, whether that's finances, whether that's how we look. We can change those things. Obviously, there's things that we can't change, but we can change those things. So when I think of Spanish and how it changed my life, it was something that I always struggled with. It was something that I didn't like, but I would always cope and be lazy and say, I don't need to learn. Once I finally realized that I needed to learn, I put in the hard work and it changed my life forever. So if you're a no Sabo kid, comment down below if you want to see more videos like this, if you want me to make content in Spanish. But it will change your life from a really good perspective. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.